Good evening. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in meetings by one accessing the webcast at www.cityofclovis.com/agendas, or two, providing written comment at the same website, participating by phone, or coming to the council meeting here in person. I'll call this meeting to order, and the flag salute will be led by Councilmember Whalen. Please join me in pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ashbeck. Here. Councilmember Bessinger.
Here.
Councilmember Monitor.
Here.
Councilmember Whalen.
Here.
And Mayor Flores.
I'm here. First order of business will be presentation and proclamation. A presentation and proclamation declaring April 24th, 2022 as Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, and that proclamation will be read by Councilmember Monitor.
Okay, pleasure to read this proclamation today. The City of Clovis declaring April 24th, 2022 as Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. Whereas each year on this day, we remember the lives of all those who died in the Ottoman-era Armenian genocide and recommit ourselves to preventing such an atrocity from ever again occurring. And whereas the Armenian genocide began with the arrest, exile, and murder of hundreds of Armenian intellectuals and political, religious, and business leaders starting on April 24th, 1915, and whereas this campaign of dispossession and murder was undertaken with the clear and ultimate purpose to annihilate the Armenian race through a practiced policy of coordinated deportation and massacre, and whereas Raphael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide in 1944, and who was the earliest proponent of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, invoked the Armenian case as a definitive example of genocide in the 20th century. And whereas the greater Fresno area, including the city of Clovis, has become home to as many as 50,000 residents of Armenian descent who have enriched our city and state through leadership in the fields of academia, medicine, business, agriculture, law, government, and the arts. And whereas by honoring the survivors and consistently remembering and forcefully condemning the atrocities committed against the Armenian people, as well as the persecution of the Assyrian and Greek populations of the Ottoman Turkish Empire, we guard against repetition of the crime of genocide. And whereas April 24th marks the anniversary of the Armenian genocide, on which Armenians throughout the Republic of Armenia and the diaspora have come together to remember and demand justice for the victims and survivors of this crime against humanity. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City of Clovis does hereby declare April 24th, 2022 as Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, and it is signed by our mayor with the Great Seal of the City of Clovis on this 18th day of April, 2022.
You know, usually we applaud at this time, but why don't we, instead of applauding, a moment of silence, because, you know, 3 short years later, we forgot. And now I think we're forgetting again because it's happening again. And there's conflict, and evil people will do evil things, and unfortunately the innocent are the victims of that evil. So I would ask for a moment of silence to all those who suffered back in 1915, in the mid-40s, and who are suffering today in this world. Yeah. Thank you. Please come up to the...
Thank you, Mayor and City Council of Clovis. I'd like to invite some church leaders to say a few words for us. We have the Very Reverend Father Khachadurian with us from the Holy Trinity Armenian Church, and we have Pastor Greg Haratunian from the First Presbyterian Armenian Church. I think it's appropriate that we hear them say a few words with what's going on in the world today.
Thank you very much. This means a lot to us as Armenians and as humans, because this act of you gives us hope in humanity and in justice once again. You today proclaimed April 24th, 2022 as Remembrance Day of the Armenian Genocide. And this act of yours makes me at least sure of the peace that is coming towards us. We all pray for peace in the world, and in nowadays, especially peace for Ukraine, because we are brothers and sisters in humanity. Thank you very much.
As a Clovis resident, thank you very much. Our church is in Fresno, but it means so much to me personally, but us as an Armenian community, because we know these things. We were, my grandparents survived this genocide that we have to make a proclamation about because the Turks continue to deny it. But when those who, out of both compassion and identification with Armenians, recognize it, there's a deep sense of validation within our community that we're not alone. We were alone then, but we're not alone anymore. And so you making this proclamation, while some would say, oh, it's just symbolic, yeah, but it's a deep symbol, and symbols make a difference. So thank you so much on behalf of our congregations and the community here in the Valley. Thank you very, very much.
A week from tomorrow, I'm going to be headed to Germany to go to my dad's prisoner of war camp. And at his camp, there are mass graves that simply say 2,500 Ukrainians. They're not sure how many people died in this camp because the Germans didn't consider the Russians to be humans. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the Germans have taken upon themselves to remember and educate their citizens about the Holocaust. It's required for young kids to go to a death camp and see what occurred. And unfortunately, there were a lot of death camps in Germany and throughout Eastern Europe. When I went to my dad's camp the first time, they talked about, and I never understood my dad's affinity towards the Russians. But when the first batch of Americans that were captured during the Battle of the Bulge were brought to the camp, they were put in with the Russians. And the Russians were thrilled because they knew that the Germans would not kill them in front of the Americans. I'm going to his camp on the 29th. That's the day it was liberated. He's the featured American POW in the camp. So I'm always proud to go there. And it's kind of, my dad died when I was 13, so I never really got to have a man conversation with my father about the war. And I wish I had. But it's important for us to do proclamations like this because we're only a generation from forgetting. And when we see what's going on in the world today, you have people denying things today that I think we all know are occurring. So that's important. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you. It's become a tradition here because we honor those who help us run the city, our commissioners. When we make appointments or renew appointments, we like to put them in front of our agenda. They're usually relegated to the end, but today we're going to bring them up to item 8, council items. Consider approval of appointments to the Personnel Commission and the Planning Commission. And so we're going to move them up now because these individuals have busy lives and they donate a lot of their busy time and busy schedules to help the city with advising us on many, many issues. So John, our city manager, will make the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'd like to start off by recognizing and thanking the Personnel Commissioners, outgoing Personnel Commissioners, I'd like to say. Carrie Mercer, who served since 2014, Darren Rose, who served since 2016, and Jerry Schuber, who recently moved out of state, served since 2007. With regards to reappointments and appointments to the Personnel Commission, the Mayor is recommending the reappointment of Scott Federhoff and the appointment of Eric Zetz, Tom Close, and Jim Barrows for a term through 2026. Additionally, for the Personnel Commission, the Mayor is recommending the reappointment of Alma Antuna and Amy Hatcher. That concludes staff's report, and we're available for questions.
Any questions for staff, for the council? Any public comments from the public? Any from the web? These are
No.
just. How about the commissioners? Any commissioner who would like to say?
Barris is very shy. I'm not so sure he's gonna.
Any statements from the commissioners?
He doesn't have enough Cheez-Its to last too long, so.
Anyone from the Personnel Commission? No? Oh, they're just here. Can you all rise? First, the Personnel Commission. We have.
I don't know who Eric Zetz is. Let's see. Oh, yeah.
There.
Do you have any experience in the city of Clovis?
Well, I know Jim, Tom just helped us out with the Police Advisory Committee. Eric, everybody knows Eric. And Scott, he's been there. So, thank you all for the new volunteers. And now for the Planning Commission, the stalwarts. We appreciate the work you guys do. It's significant, and it does help us when we receive the contributions you make. It really does put that finger in the water to show what that climate is out there and what our citizens are wanting, what the different people in our community are asking for in both commissions. And without your work, it'd be harder for us to do our work. And I'm sure the staff feels the same way. So they need to hear your input, your knowledge and skills. Everything you bring to the table is very important because it guides staff and it also guides us to make our city a better place. Anyone else?
So I'd like to make a motion, if I may, as the only council member who has been both a personnel commissioner and a planning commissioner. If I might do that, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we, appoint all of the individuals that you have just identified.
I'll second that. Is Tom here?
Tom Close?
Oh, okay, there you
There he
are.
is.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom and I have a long relationship. We were both deputy sheriffs once upon a time. And, he rose to the rank of sergeant, then became a chief of police of Sanger. So now he's a great, citizen of Clovis, so.
Scott, I don't know what you're expecting from, the future of the Personnel Commission, but with the addition of some of these guys, you're gonna have a pretty lively, group. So just, brace yourself, I guess, would be my suggestion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So the motion passes
Thank you all.
unanimously. Thank you.
Congratulations, thank you all. Good to see you, Eric.
Christos, right, Christos? The whole family.
Bye. See you later. Have fun with those chicken nuggets.
I don't know where you get that personality from.
It's like, where'd all the people go?
Okay, next is public comments. This is the opportunity for the members of the public to address the city council on any matter within the city council's jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, or 10 minutes per topic. Anyone wishing to be placed on the agenda for a specific topic should contact the city manager's office and submit correspondence at least 10 days before the desired date of appearance. Anyone in the public wishing to make comments? Anyone on the web?
No.
And so we move on. Ordinances and resolutions. With respect to the approval of resolutions and ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading, a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, and unless there is a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading of the resolution or ordinance shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. Consent calendar. Items considered routine in nature are to be placed upon the consent calendar. They will all be considered and voted upon in one vote as one item unless council members request individual consideration. Council members' vote is in favor of the consent calendar is considered and recorded as a separate affirmative vote in favor of each action listed. Motions in favor of adoption of the consent calendar are deemed to include a motion to waive the reading of any ordinance or resolution on the consent calendar. For adoption of ordinances, only those that have received a unanimous vote upon introduction are considered consent items. Does any council member wish to pull any item on the consent calendar? See none? Anyone in the audience wishing to pull an item from the consent calendar? No? Anyone on the web?
No.
So,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, 5-0, and no nays. Public hearings. A public hearing is an open consideration within a regular or special meeting of the City Council for which special notice has been given and may be required. When a public hearing is continued, noticing of the adjourned item is required as per Government Code 54,955.1. Our first item is 5 consider introduction of an ordinance, a request to adopt a military equipment use policy pursuant to Assembly Bill 481, approval of policy 706, and the adopted ordinance will allow the Clovis Police Department to continue to use its existing military equipment in accordance with the new law requirements. The staff member will be our Chief of Police, Kurt Fleming, and Police Lieutenant Bert Hirschberger. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. This evening, we're wanting the City Council to consider an introduction of an ordinance to adopt our military equipment use policy pursuant to Assembly Bill 481. On September 30th of 2021, Governor Newsom signed into law several major pieces of officer reform bills, including Assembly Bill 481. This was authored to address the funding, acquisition, and use of items lawmakers deem to be military use equipment. The bill requires us to come before council for an approval of this adoption of this policy and ordinance before we can acquire, fund, or use any of this equipment. So the lawmakers broke into categories, about 15 categories, describing the equipments that they considered military use equipment. We currently have several of those items that fall into those categories, which are listed in that your agenda packets and the attachments. Each of those were described. Costs associated with them were also put into that document. And for us, this went into effect January 1st. For us to continue to be able to use these items that we currently have already, this ordinance would need to be passed along with our policy approved this evening, so we continue to use these items after May 1st of this year. A couple other requirements associated with this Assembly bill is we had to post on our website 30 days prior to tonight's meeting the draft policy to comply with this Assembly bill for the public to comment on or be made aware of prior to this meeting. We also had established a complaint process. So we gave them, the public, 3 different ways to communicate with the police department, either through email, through a phone number, or through direct mail to us if they have any complaints with any of this equipment that's used. Per the policy, we're required to investigate those complaints, keep track of them, and then document them in an annual report to council. So at this time, we're looking probably February of next year to have that first annual report to come to council, or actually post that on our website, and then probably come back to council somewhere around the same time next year with that annual report to discuss any complaints or usages of this military equipment, and then we'll need council to reapprove the ordinance and the policy to allow us to continue to use this equipment. And we'll have to do that every year going forward. So that is my presentation, and I'm open for and available for any questions. Lieutenant Hirschberger is my military equipment coordinator, so if you have some very in-depth questions, I'm going to refer to him to help me out here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for putting together the policy. You know, the temptation is always great to kind of pick on the state of California for having us go through some of these, I'll call them hurdles. But, you know, I have had people who have wondered why it is specifically that we have I think it's the MRAP, is that what it is? Because that is an intimidating looking vehicle. So they do have questions about, okay, well, why is it that we have that? And so I've explained to them that, you know, we have this for the protection of our personnel and also for the protection of others. And there are going to be certain situations where it's going to be really important that we have a vehicle like that, not just us, but also other agencies might want to use this particular vehicle. And there have been occasions when that has happened. So once I explain that to them and I tell them the cost for the MRAP, then they understand why it is that we have that. I did notice that we have the Bearcat. The Bearcat seems to be very similar to the MRAP, but the MRAP wasn't free from the government. It was something that cost us some money. So am I to understand correctly that we have 2 of these types of vehicles? And I guess my question is, why do we have 2 of them? And then secondarily, if the vehicle is for free from the military, how come we paid for the Bearcat?
So the MRAP we received several years ago for free. It's served us well. It has cost very limited. The maintenance is starting to grow on that, and there's very few people that have the skill set, I guess, or mechanical experience to work on it. The other issue with it, it requires a Class B license, so we only have a few people that can drive that vehicle, and it's typically used for pre-planned operations. So if we had a SWAT warrant or some pre-planned warrant, we would use that vehicle, or if it was requested by another agency. So it's served us well for the zero cost factor on it. The Bearcat is why we approached council this last year, is it only requires a Class C driver's license. So the Bearcat, multiple agencies throughout the Central Valley have them. A lot of warrants that we serve will typically have 2 Bearcats on scene for a lot of these warrants. And really with some of the situations we've seen across the nation over the last several years where we have these active shooters, we don't have time, we don't have a standby or on-call SWAT team that's actively working. It would take several hours. So any officer can go back to the police department. They'll be trained to use that Bearcat when we receive it, and it can respond to any call if we're in an active shooter situation. So that's why we chose to spend the money to protect all of our officers and have the ability to use that and really to protect the public as well. The MRAP is probably, we'll continue to keep it going as long as we can, but I'm assuming probably in the next 5 years it'll probably outlive its life and we'll probably have to turn that back in, or I'm not sure what the process is to get rid of that vehicle, yeah.
Probably had a life before it had a life with us
Yeah.
as well, so.
Yeah.
I was just surprised, at some of the requests that were, put into this particular bill. It seems like it's, have OC spray there, rubber bullets, or those have been a part of law enforcement's, abilities to, kind of protect with, not just themselves, but also, the public. And so I was surprised to find that in there, but if that's what the bill requires, obviously we're gonna, follow what the bill requires. And I did like that portion of the policy which talks about, kind of the, shared operations, that there may be with other agencies within the county, and how we've kind of worded that to make sure that it's gonna be, I think, not just in compliance with the law, but also in compliance with, really the spirit of the law, as it relates to the other agencies as well. So good work on putting that policy together, whoever it was. Good work approving it, thanks.
Are any of the equipment state funded and then it gets passed down to jurisdictions where we purchase from the state?
No, the only equipment we currently have through the 1033 exchange program, the Councilmember Whalen mentioned, is the MRAP. In the past, we have received some Conex-type storage buildings that we got from the military. Those are since gotten rid of. I think we had a small van from the Navy at one point, an actual civilian van. And we currently have some rifles that are inoperable. They're more for honor guard for ceremonial purposes. Other than that, there's no other military equipment that we have acquired or currently are in possession of, besides the things that have been described as military equipment here.
And with regards to the policy, it talks about acquisition. So if you saw something after we passed it today, but it's not listed in this, what's the procedure? Can you go acquire it and then list it for next year, or you need us to approve it before you even can obtain it?
So even in here, a drone, a UAV that we use all the time on patrol, I think we have listed in here maybe 20 of a certain type. If I wanted to go out and buy a 21st of that above and beyond what council's approving tonight, I would have to come back and ask for approval to go beyond what it is within this ordinance. So yeah, any equipment that's not listed here, during this next year period of time, I'd have to come back to council if we wanted to acquire and ask for funding for that. If not, we would have to wait until the next year when we come forward before council to ask for any additional items.
Is there a way to draft it in which, if it's something that we've already approved, you may find it for a good price, the deal may be right now, in which we can write it in a way in which you can add you know, more, because we may need it, we may grow, or some may fail. And so how can we write it in such a way in which we can assist you to do your job quicker and more efficiently, other than wait till the end of the year, the sale may be gone, or that equipment may be sold other places, and we lost the opportunity. So is there a way to do that, or is the code written so strictly that it's a once-a-year deal, your numbers have to be specific, and you can't go above that number?
Yeah, so if something broke, let's say we had 20 authorized by council for drones, and one of them broke, I could go purchase another one to keep that inventory consistent. But to go beyond that or get a different model that's outside of what is approved, then we would have to come back before council for approval. And I'm not sure that, I'd have to have Scott answer that, if that's a consent item, or if that's something that's another public meeting, or how that would have to take place.
So, yeah, Mayor and Council, just to add on to what Kurt had said, in addition to that, you could include items in the budget, and budget for them as separate approval items in addition to what's in the inventory, so that could be another mechanism. If you're anticipating something, we could put it in the annual budget. We could do that as well. We do have some language in the existing policy that does allow for replenishment of items that may be used during the year. Certain ammunition, I think we listed in the inventory, so again, they're not going to have to come, the department's not going to have to come to council every time they want to purchase something that gets used throughout the year, as Kurt said. But other than that, I think the annual review process would be one mechanism to do it, or through the budget process, or if a specific item comes up and comes available that wasn't anticipated but it's needed, they could come to council. Consent item, I'd have to look into that. I don't think other than the annual review of this process and then tonight's process, those are the only thing that I recall being for a public hearing type item. So other than, you know, the normal procurement process, whether that's on consent, I guess we could do that or look into it to try and simplify the process. But once the policy is approved, then we do have some flexibility and some availability to purchase new equipment as it becomes available.
Yeah, I think for myself, I just want the ability for you to be able to work as quickly, as efficiently as possible, yet abiding by the intent of the law. And so, you know, technology changes so quickly. There may be something considered military that is just technology, and we may want something like that. And I don't want it to be where you wait a whole year to be able to obtain it when it can help make us safer quickly. So that, however we can do that, I'm in full support as we look into that. And this is just a more knowledge for me. What you face out in the streets, are there military-style type, whatever, equipment that is dangerous to police and other public there already? In other words, do you see that in your daily work in the public?
Yeah, I guess what you defined as military, and that's what the legislature's defined. A lot of these items are less lethal items. They're items that we use to de-escalate situations. They're really protective equipment. So it's kind of confusing by this law, frankly. The MRAP, like as an example, is a military vehicle, but its sole purpose is to provide armor protection for our officers, for the public. If we're going into a mall shooting and we drove the MRAP up there and we gathered some civilians, got them in the back and drove them out of there, that vehicle has a capability to take rifle fire and protect all the people inside. So I've always been confused, I guess, why our citizens are so concerned that we're utilizing some equipment that the taxpayers have paid for, that we're using it free at a local level for free. We're using that, and it's simply a protective tool. It serves no other purpose than to protect us. It doesn't provide any, platform for to shoot, I guess, for equipment to fire weapons or do other things. It's just a vehicle that provides protection. So I guess military, like, if you're saying explosive devices, things like that, that is something we could utilize if we ran across those using, the MRAP to protect us out in the city.
So I was trying to get at, does the public already have military-style arsenals in which it's stronger than what we currently have, where this only helps protect us just using these equipments? Because it's not just a 44 or a 9 shooting at you. They may be having something that's illegal, we can say. And so I think that shows the justification for why we need these. But if you're not meeting any of those things, where people are just throwing rocks at you every day, then it shows that, okay, why do we need it? And so I think I just want to hear that, it's very dangerous out there, because, most of us who are in the public who don't see it every day don't realize it, don't see the dangers out there. And so
I see it as dangerous.
Yeah.
I can tell you about the shootings and the deaths of Javier Bejar and Wally Wallenmeyer, one of my detectives, who, after a group of detectives went up to the door, were shot upon with high-power rifles. Wally never survived that encounter. And it took a couple of the Bearcats to extricate, rescue a whole bunch of officers who went there to try to rescue those fallen officers. But for the armored vehicles that showed up, I think one must have been Clovis's, those officers were pinned down, and they couldn't move. They were CHP, Fresno Sheriff, Reedley. I was there. I heard bullets flying over my head until those vehicles showed up and protected those. That way they could form a barrier and come out. So what these legislators up in Sacramento are doing is just tying the hands of law enforcement. AK-47s or their civilian counterparts, they're out there. ARs, they're out there. Those weapons can defeat any vest any of our officers are carrying. We need comparable equipment, and we need protection for our officers. We cannot send our officers out there when they know they're going to encounter those types of weapons. We have people that know how to make explosives, and so we need to protect our people as they go. We need surveillance vehicles. That's why these drones have are force multipliers. Not every agency can afford a helicopter, but they can surely afford a drone. And for the legislators in Sacramento to make it these onerous policies and laws that now every police agency has to go through, is short-sighted, and it favors the crooks, not officers and not the victim. Our legislators in Sacramento are legislating for the suspects, for the criminals, not for police, and definitely not for the victims. Mm-hmm. So the good thing is that at least in this city council, I hope, as long as, we're here, when they come with the report, they'll get everything they need, because we're not militarizing our police force. We're protecting our police force, and they just need this type of equipment. We're protecting our police force. It's not militarizing.
No, I appreciate the answer of the mayor, because I think that's what we don't hear as citizens as much, that this equipment saved this victim's life as well as these officers so they can go home. And this is how many times it was used to save it. And I think they demonized the equipment more than show how much it has allowed us to keep everyone safer. And that's why I asked that question, because we don't see it every day. And thank you, Mayor, for sharing that personal story.
See the footage of the bank robbery back in February 28, 1997. Hollywood. Those officers, LAPD, one of the best equipped law enforcement agency in the world, was outgunned by two guys. Two guys outgunned a whole police force. These officers had to break into a gun shop just to have an equal footing with two crooks. And they say that the police is trying to militarize. No. They're trying to protect themselves and the public they serve. And for that, this legislator up in Sacramento is penalizing them and penalizing the departments they work for and the cities that hire them to protect us. This is backwards legislation, and this governor is an idiot for signing these bills.
I go back to however we can next time write this policy to assist you quicker, but still abide. Please bring that so that way we can help you do your job much better. And so, thank you.
Lynn was first.
Thank you, Joe, for the stories. I think what I was thinking about is it's an example of a bill that is solving the wrong problem. So it's just a list of things. It's the humans that use them that make it effective or not. And Clovis has the best trained officers around. So it's an unfortunate piece of legislation that the list you have today is the list you have. But next Thursday, if something happens, right, and you need the 21st drone, I just want to second what Councilmember Wanatua said. There has got to be a way to give you some flexibility to do what you need to do your job. So it's really disappointing because it's a piece of legislation in search of a problem to solve, but this is not going to get at whatever was the sentiment of the day, I guess. So I don't know. Yeah. So anyway, I just want to support what Councilmember Wanatua said. There has got to be a way to give you some flexibility.
I won't be shy to come back as soon as we need something.
Shy is not a word I'd use to describe you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to buy 6 tanks. I mean, that's a silly image. But anyway, I just want to say thank you for what you do. And but these are just things, and it's you all that make this stuff work to keep people safe, and that's what you're there to do. So.
Thank you.
It's difficult to look into the heart of the people who wrote this and come up with their motives. But I would have to concur with Jose that this is not supporting the police, it's not supporting the community, it's making things easier on people who want to riot and burn and do things like that. There was a big discussion several years back called the militarization of Mayberry, where they looked at the change of what police were wearing. And when I became a police officer, if you wore a long sleeve shirt, you had to wear a tie. And so I learned to fight wearing a tie. And since then, you see people wearing load-bearing vests, which initially I was against. I was old school, but it really saves us a lot of workers' comp injuries for backs and necks and shoulders and things like that. And I think it's for good citizens who are questioning why are we doing this, it's a little unsettling for them because the sheepdog looks like the wolf. They both have teeth, they both bark, but one of them's there to harm you and the other one's there to save you. And it just makes them a little concerned sometimes. I would hope that eventually somebody in Sacramento, and I've actually have made this suggestion to several of our legislators, that whenever somebody votes or puts something forward on this, they need to opt out of their CHP protection. If you go to a function for League of Cities, all the assembly members and senators show up with at least 2 CHP officers protecting them. So it's good for them, but not good for thee. And so it's just gotten to the point where the hypocrisy it disgusts me at times. And if there's things that are going to be out there to protect our officers who can protect the citizens, we need to make sure that we take advantage of those things. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you guys do. It's obvious that To this day, up in Sacramento, there is this abolish the police movement, there's the defund the police movement. I don't care what Governor Newsom says. He still believes it, and he hasn't changed. And the legislature, the majority, the great majority, hasn't changed. They have to change. They have to see, and we, the citizens, the voters of California, have to send that loud message that you have to start like we used to. Think about the victims. Back in the 90s, we changed things because we put the criminals, the violent criminals, not everybody, but the violent criminals behind bars, and now they're getting out. It's a rotating judicial system, and the violent criminal gets out. And as soon as they go in, and we saw that in Sacramento. There was a massacre in Sacramento, and what happened to that parolee that shouldn't have been out? He was out, and he was able to kill more people. And so shame on them. The chickens came home to roost in their own community. Why? And who is the ultimate victim? They keep saying that they're doing it for equity and to protect the people of color. Well, as a person of color, I'm telling them they're not protecting me. They're not protecting the people of color, because the violence that is all over California is in those communities of color, and they're fomenting that violence with these stupid laws. They need to change the laws. The 3 strikes and you're out, beautiful law, because it focused on those that couldn't correct themselves. It wasn't the petty thief. It was those that were violent and violent again, and by the 3rd time, you went to prison. Now, the prisons are empty, and guess what? We have all of this violence in the street, and now cities cannot give the proper equipment to their officers. It's just unreal. It's a dystopian world we're living in, and California has to change. It's just got to change. Anyway, so I guess it's an action item. So, no more questions. Anyone from the audience? Now I'll open it to the public. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item? I'm a little animated. This issue. Well, this is my bread and butter, and I can't believe what the abolish the police movement in California is alive and well in Sacramento. We got to stop it. Anyway, anyone on the web?
No.
Okay. I move that we approve this. I hate to make the motion because as a council, we shouldn't have to. They're micromanaging us again with this evil law, and I say, we just had Easter. It's an evil law. How dare they tell us that we must limit our police? How dare they? And they've done it, and we can't do anything about it. But they've said, do this or else, and so they have tied the hands of our officers, and that's evil. Because what hands have they tied of the criminal?
No, they've loosened them.
They've loosened them. Prop 47, Prop 57, and the rest. It's just ridiculous. Okay, so I'll make the motion that we approve.
Second.
And so there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, thank you. And thank you for the comments and the support. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's a tough job you do, guys. Yeah, buy another tank. No, I want a drone, a big one, jet powered. Make it regional. Protect those small cities that can't protect themselves.
Right.
Huh?
Yeah, you're right.
You're probably going to show that. Off the record. Okay, we're 6. Administrative items are matters on the regular city council agenda other than public hearings. 6, consider adoption of ordinance 2202, amending Clovis Municipal Code, Section 2.1.32, establishing salaries and city council members, and increasing the percent salary to become effective after November 2022 municipal election. The vote was 3-1 and 1, 3 ayes, 1 no, and 1 absence, with Councilmember Montiel voting no and Councilmember Whalen absent. The staff member is our city clerk, Carrie Shaw. Recommendation is to adopt. So,
thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Just quickly, this item is back before you on the regular agenda because it was voted and approved with less than a unanimous vote from our last meeting. So,
that's it?
For you. Yep.
Does anyone in the council need any further report or have questions?
Well, I'm really sorry that I wasn't here, because these are one of the votes that we get to do that, can be a little bit challenging for us as council to vote on our own salary. And so I want to vote on this one, because I think that it's important that we go on the record regardless of where we are. So, I am curious about Vong's position, and I don't want to have to rehash the whole deal, but can you I didn't know where you were on it.
No, mine was more of a procedure. I prefer that if it came after salary negotiations.
Oh, I see. So we could make sure that we
so that way, yeah, I think it doesn't look good. And then what if we deny? And the perception is not that, hey, it was just only for the past, or it's not until the election coming forward. Mm-hmm. People don't see it that way. They just, they vote for them, and then June, depending on how it all goes. Yeah. That was more my position than anything, because I think we were always very modest with how we voted on these items.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves ahead of city employees, and we haven't done that since I've been on the council. So I appreciate that sentiment. It is kind of hard procedurally to do it, but anyway, I have read the staff report. I do want to vote on this item. So if you would allow me, I would like to go ahead and participate in the vote when it's time.
Any more comments?
I'm ready to make a motion, but...
Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item? Anyone on the web?
No.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we amend the municipal code establishing the salaries of the city council members.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those who say no?
Nay.
So the vote is 4 ayes and 1 no. Thank you. Next one is item 7, receive and file 2021 Fire Department Annual Report and Council presentation by our Fire Chief John Benansky.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to express the good work of the men and women of the Clovis Fire Department, show us where our performance is, and this is our basically opportunity to report back to you as the governing body and to the citizens at large of the work and performance of the fire department. I do appreciate the light agenda at 7, so I'll try to get done before 9. So we've all been known to my many slides and work of where we are.
Too bad your career's coming to an end tonight. Just kidding.
My wife said, do you need dinner before you go? That exactly is it. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and we want to just highlight a few things that we're doing well and a few, unfortunately, that we keep falling behind in. So the first part about this is we have a community risk assessment, which we go back and we look at all of the buildings within the city. We assign a risk factor to it, and then we decide and determine how we service those types of businesses, residents, kind of like what you saw recently in San Jose, the Home Depot. All those things get assigned a risk, how we then respond to them, and that's basically our standard to cover. We're doing our 5-year update to that right now. We will bring that back to you later this summer, along with our department strategic plan. We had our public input from external stakeholders in late 21, and then we did our internal stakeholders, and now we're putting that all together. And then the last of our document is this annual report that we bring in every year to kind of update everybody where we are. So what we've done, we've got Station 6. It started construction in February of 21. We are hoping to be completed by June of this year and moved over there. We were fortunate to receive an AFG grant for SAFER to staff that early. To be honest, we applied at the absolute right time. COVID hit, nobody else really applied, and so we were able to get those funds. But truly, my plan was apply. If we got denied, then it gives us round two to improve upon and where we were. So we actually got a little bit early due to the low percentage of people who applied. The crew came on a little bit earlier, but at least it came at no cost to the taxpayer. So that instilled that new fire company. It went into service in July of 21. We put it out to Station 5 because it was the only station we had that had 6 bedrooms that could also help service the area of Station 6. We went out and replaced our 4 command vehicles, and we were fortunate enough with council funding. One was paid with developer impact fees, and one was paid for with general fund to replace 2 fire engines. And then we had our largest hiring since 1999. We hired a group of 10. We tried very hard to find 11 or 12 because of vacancies, because, you know, it was the power of 10 from 1989, which was the largest hiring. We wanted to make sure that we outdid them, but unfortunately the power of 10 got the stick because through background in our hiring process, we were only able to get 10 again. So we were trying to put the power of 10 to rest with their little nickname for themselves, but it didn't happen, so we came back again. We hired 3 additional to bring us back up to fully staffed where we are today. So as we look at where we are today, and I want to spend some time about this and a little bit about the budget. So if you look back in 2007, we were at 67 sworn personnel. We also used to, on top of that, we had 9 administrative people. Today we're at 67, and I only have 6 administrative people. We had 2 deputy chiefs. We had 2 people and sworn people in training. We had another person is the fire marshal that was sworn back then. So really what we've done over the last 10 years or so is we've cannibalized and put as many people as I can into operations and funded onto responses and not administration. So that's where we are with that. Now, our budget, if you look at it, was $12.3 million we'll look back at the 2012 range, it's $20.3 million today. During that period, PERS rates went from 30.5 to 23% or 53% today. So we did a 23% increase in pension. During that same 10-year period, through cost of living adjustments, we did 24% in raises. We did 8% in just the last 7 years in healthcare costs. We then did back there, if you go a little bit farther back, if you remember the presentation from Luke and Jay, we were actually negative. We were overspending the revenue in that 2004-2007 revenue or period, and we were spending a lot more on personnel than we were on capital. So if you look where we are today, part of that, so that basically takes us roughly from 12 to 18 million of where that increase was, about 17.6. We then now have spent money on fire engines and command vehicles and stuff like that we've had to replace. And we've got a whole slide just on our fleet replacement. But we've had to be able, originally we were buying, during the recession, we eliminated the fleet replacement fund, so we would come back and we'd purchase and we'd have to put that as a bond. Well, before that was paid out of the fleet replacement account, now once it's bond debt, finances to show where it goes, it comes out of every year to pay the bonds back out of the fire department budget. And then the other portion that drove the last little bit of about the last $1.5 million is we used to go back, when you look at 2012 range, we did about 500,000 in out-of-county responses. Last year we were about $1.7 million. The year before that we were $1.5 million. We still have to account for that revenue that comes in, even though the local taxpayer doesn't pay for that. The state and feds do, but it still comes into our budget, comes into the act for, it has to be allocated. So that then is what brings us up to the 20.3 million, including the revenue for the SAFER grant comes in, and then it comes and shows in our budget. So that's about where we come then to the $20 million. So we really haven't expanded, and really what we've made the difference of is we've had to spend money in capital to make up for where we were before. Between 2002 and 2012, a 10-year period, we replaced 2 fire engines and purchased 1 for the opening of Station 5. So the fleet had over 10 engines in a 10-year period. We only replaced 2 of them. So we were really lacking during that period in fleet replacement. So unfortunately, we've had to make up for that in the last 6, 7 years. So it's a trade-off. Personnel, capital, it's how do we keep it level and how do we get that through? But I know that's always been your question, Councilman Wellen, so I wanted to make sure that kind of explain how did the budget go up, how are we on the same number, how are we there, and where the money actually went. But as you can see, population has risen. It's really the first increase, and we used to, back there when it was 68, we had 2 companies at Station 2, so that's why the number was so high. So we actually had 2 fire companies at Station 2, Station 5, and that's how when the recession hit, we eliminated the second company in Station 2, and basically the only expansion was then the, really wasn't any, we just moved the crew to 5s. So where are we with call volume? We've been pretty steady at about 10,500 calls for service of where we arrive on scene. And we've done that if you look at the overall calls. So right now we go at the top line there about 7,000 EMS calls. If you go through all the calls for just EMS in the city of Clovis that you see American Ambulance respond to, that's 16,000 calls for service. We only go to the high acuity calls, what we call priority 1 and priority 2 calls, and a couple of priority 3s. It goes all the way down to priority 4. There's almost 9,000 calls that the fire department doesn't respond to. And the reason why we don't do that is we've looked at a few studies. It was nice when UC Merced opened. They did a very good study of looking at 385,000 EMS calls and the level of service that needed to be there. We're trying to make sure we're available for that motor vehicle accident, that cardiac arrest, chest pain, stroke call, those high calls that use a lot of staffing. So in turn, that's why we only go to those high acuity calls. Then you go down the rest of the calls and fire calls, and that's how we manage to keep it pretty steady as we keep taking some calls off that list based off of studies that we've done.
I had a question for you on, and I'll have a question for you on that slide too, but this one here.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I want to double check my report because I thought I had a different figure for fire in my report than what was on that. And I just want to double check that before I ask my question here.
386. Looks the same on page 4.
Okay, I must not have had my glasses on.
Okay.
So
You're making me,
I thought it was,
because I didn't put the tables together. I'll admit my great staff, my management analysts put the actual tables together and made them all look pretty for red because they're all yellow and black in the annual report. So, you know, I'm only as good as the people below me.
So this slide represents how many times you guys actually responded or how many times you received a call asking for a response. When I look at this calls for service, because I thought you had mentioned there are some calls that we don't go to.
Correct. We do not get that through ProQA dispatch. So as you call in, what's your emergency? The computer runs questions through, and based on how you answer those questions determines the priority of your call.
Okay.
Even some of those calls that we go on, we do not go lights and sirens on anymore.
All right, so this slide here is representing all of the time that fire personnel are called out.
Correct.
And respond. Now, what struck me was that fire is only 4% of your calls, and you are the fire department. When you really seem to be more of an emergency medical services type of organization. And you know, one of the ways that I, you know, and it kind of lends itself to the next slide, is I really want to get our response times down. And you're very practical, and your approach to, you know, what can be done in order to make sure that we get our response times down. And you know, we were talking earlier about the fire apparatus and how expensive the fire apparatus is, and if so many of our calls are emergency medical, is there some way, and only 4% are fire, is there some way we can kind of have a vehicle that is going to respond more quickly to an emergency medical call? Because it seems like we're responding to every call with a fire engine, yet only 4% of our calls are fire. Now, I know that in our fire engines, we also have some medical equipment associated with it, and maybe we need that size of a vehicle for every potential emergency medical situation that comes up. But it seems to me that if there was a vehicle that could move more quickly to emergency medical call, that we could get our response times down.
Okay. You're definitely not the first council member, and I'm definitely not the fire chief to answer this. So, we'll go through this one as best as we can. So, we are fortunate that every intersection in the city of Clovis has preemption.
Right.
So, we automatically get the green, that helps the speed.
That's why I go behind the fire trucks every time I can.
Every time, where we should go. And the only time you see it where it doesn't work is the walk signal is, stuck or someone has pushed it. We cannot override for the pedestrian. But if you actually go and look at our response times where we really, and you're really jumping ahead of my slide. So
I can actually wait if you want. Would that work better for you? Because
let's just wait. I'll address that one in like 3 different pieces.
Okay,
so
sounds good.
Let's go through that. Anything else on this one?
No.
Okay. So as you see here, this is the first time we've hit orange at 8 minutes. And we double-checked and triple-checked and quadruple-checked the numbers because MBAs and EMS both came at 8 minutes, so lucky we pay for this person who's got a PhD in statistics and everything, and he confirmed that our 8 minutes, because I was like, what's the odds of them both being at 8 minutes? But they were, and how you get there. So if you remember back to what you always bring up is the 4 minutes of excellence. So it's what we used to report back in like '04 during Chief Aston, which is 4 minutes to excellence, and that was travel time. Our travel time has gone from 4 minutes to 5 minutes and 12 seconds. So it's definitely increased. But part of those things, no matter which vehicle I put you in, the other thing to remember when we talk about vehicles is that in order to go fight fire, I need them in that engine, the 3 people, to complete critical tasks. So the only way then to put them in a smaller vehicle, like let's say an SUV, the responding medical aids would be to increase staffing or cross-staff them. Well, if I cross-staff them, the engine's still only going to last 15 years, and I still have to incur that cost. I would have to incur the cost of fuel and maintain that one, and then the SUV, I'd have to incur the cost of fuel and maintain it too. So, and they're running about 120,000 fully outfitted, so it adds to that cost. And then what do I do if they have a fire call in their first due, but they're on the SUV? So the only way I've ever seen it work is really busy fire stations that are over what we call unit hour utilization to put in an SUV to be able to respond to those calls, to kind of take a pressure relief valve off them. Is really the only way it seems to be effective of cost dollar value for it. The rest of it as we go through is we really don't lose time till we get to a residential neighborhood. And that really kind of goes back to when we talk a little bit about planning, the expressways that we have in the city, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about this, but as soon as I turn into the residential neighborhood, the speed limit is 25 if I'm driving the SUV or if I'm driving big red fire engine. Kids can come out between the cars. We've got to be cautious of everybody that's there. That is really, that type of development is really what's hindering our types of responses. And if you look down Temperance, it's a great example of how close the fire engines are, but I have to go full quarter sections to come around and then auger my way in like 2,200 feet, half a mile at 25, which is well over a minute at 25 miles an hour, just to get to that final leg of that response. And then the same thing occurs on Shepherd. And the way we then do developments is if you look at our center core, which is still our best performance in the city, the center core has a couple things that we actually wrote in for the Heritage Grove plan. So far, we've had 2 developers out there. We followed it that much to it, which was much more lateral streets, back to the grid formation, 2 entrances on each quarter section, enables us to get in there, enables us to ride the 45, 50 mile an hour exterior street, get our way in there. We kind of went away with that. We went away with it completely in Harlan Ranch. We were really good at doing center corridor or center medians with landscaping pieces, which then people park, so it narrows up the street. Those types of things all hinder our response times, and those are some of the difficulties that, unfortunately, through that planning that we've done, we're never going to go back and be able to fix that, unfortunately. But even when we get to the next slide, you'll see Harlan Ranch out there, 10.5 minutes. Even when Owens Mountain Parkway goes through, even if I put them in an SUV, we're never, ever from Station 5 going to meet that response time of our goal of 6 minutes and 30 seconds. It's just physically impossible. The way it's designed, the way the layout is, gates, all those pieces that we do. But we put a lot of effort into, because we know law enforcement like gates, home buyers do. We put opticoms in them. It's reduced the time now down to about 12 seconds for them to actually open for us. It signals it earlier, so we don't have to wait for a button or get out and use a key. We try to use technology the best we can to get where we are, but We're unfortunately losing ground. The other thing you see is the higher the densities are that we put in that are forced to us on by the state, is there's a reason why when you go to LA City, San Francisco and stuff, like every other corner you see a fire station. It's just because the densities are so high. The more calls for service, the higher the density, know that we can't use our 3-mile circles that we use for fire stations, that they will have to become sooner, closer together than where we are when they were single-family residents, much more spaced out. It's just the nature of the beast. But where you are, as you see where we are, we're definitely hitting the orange, which we've never hit. We should see improvement when Station 6 opens, but no way is it going to get us back to the green. Now, you challenged me on dispatch, and well, here's one of the slides that's not in your annual report that we put in, but where we used to be. For EMS total response time, we were 7:17, 7:01, 7:12, now we're at 8 minutes. Fires, we were at 6, 7:41, 7:41, 8:24, 7:43. So we definitely have increased in our response times on all categories. 20 for EMS and 21 is a little bizarre. We asked a lot of questions in our Pro-QA to people, just like we did in, I want to say that's 17 when we had Ebola. We were asking, did you travel outside the country? Where were you? That slowed things up. We actually trimmed that back down to about 17 seconds or so has come off the top of dispatch since we eliminated all the COVID Pro-QA. We've assumed everybody's got COVID. We're going to treat everybody in the future like you have COVID, so it doesn't really matter to it. So we've trimmed that. You've allocated us the funds. It's software companies, so they're not the most receptive, fastest people to work like we like to see, but we are working on our CAD to CAD with Chief Fleming and his staff's assistants, which has been great, to be able to take, instead of we lose about 20 seconds, maybe even 30 of hello, where are you, states your name, confirms the phone number, confirms everything that's not on a regular landline. When you picked up a landline before, you used to populate right in dispatch. It was simple and easy. None of that's there anymore. So we have to ask those questions. They then transfer that to EMS communications, and to fill in their CAD, they have to ask the exact same questions again. Now we're going to set up a CAD to CAD. When the questions get asked, it'll just populate in their CAD. Saves us another 20 seconds to try to trim that down to bring that much more into alignment to save seconds on every one of those. Turnout time, we've done a great job of keeping us about 1.5 minutes. You're probably not going to get any better of getting them out of the station in the rig, whether or not they were in a big vehicle or a small vehicle. But here's the map. The map's got a lot more purple to it than it's ever had before. If you look where we're going to the north of Shepherd out there, we're already on the full extent of Engine 43 or Station 43 on Minnewawa, north of Herndon there, responding up there. We're already in the purple. Hopefully, a majority of everything in that right-hand corner that you see in purple when Station 6 opens will start to turn back to green. But remember, Shaw will be closed for a portion of that. The street that we put the fire station on doesn't go out to DeWolf till development occurs out there, so we have to auger around through the park, get to Gettysburg, make a right, and we need road improvements that's somewhere on Leonard, south of Loma Vista there, will have to be closed in order to put the road improvements between Loma Vista and the Clovis East High School. So even though we're going to be out there, there's still a lot of construction, a lot of pieces going on, so if it isn't all green, don't hold that against me. I can't control development and when things get put in, but it'll start to help. But if you really look at our best performance, it's that center core. It's still the center core, and it's not because they have more stations or more served. It's really the network and the road network that's laid out there and how it works. And that kind of brought me back to where I was going to on this slide, was the Shepherd, Willow, Temperance not allowing access to developments in the middle of the quarter sections is an issue for us. Higher density, along with narrowing the streets, not enough on-site parking, or apparently people buy homes with two-car garage, and they have so much stuff that they can't put 2 cars in the garage, and we allowed them to do short driveways, so they're parked in front of the driveway, which really isn't a parking spot, and then in turn, the whole area gets us limited access to get into it. I mean, we do, as Councilmember Ashback said, we do have a lot of things that we've tried once, like I like the one HOA where they switch the no parking every other year from one side to the other, because people didn't want the no park, or wanted the no parking in front of theirs, or didn't want it, so they switched it and repaint it every other year. There's a lot of little things that we've tried that really haven't worked that well, I would say, from the fire side perspective. So I will agree with you on there of trying to see where we are. And then always have to remember is we start to finger up through nonlinear growth, that's always an issue for us. If we had our way, we like to just stack the growth right on top of each other, the road network, everything gets put in, but it's what's for sale, what's available. We do a lot of not in order to allow for development. And those all lead us to additional response times.
Can I comment? That reminds me when we had that joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the BIA was asking for trash cans as an amenity, yes, that meeting. It does make me think that from a staff perspective, and you highlight it here, but I do think we need to do an assessment of these higher density neighborhoods to see what we can learn. Because I, for one, am not that interested. If we know that's slowing down response time, it has to be the same for police at some level. They're driving smaller cars, but they still have to wind their way around. I really would like to see an analysis of some of those. Just pick a few. What do we learn from those that you don't want to duplicate? Because these builders that want to make 1,800 square foot lots, you think about the density in there and the cars. I think we have an opportunity right now. We said we'd do it as a pilot, and now we've done it 15
Well, we did
times.
Fire did look at all of, well, we'll use the old term PUDs instead of PRDs, and I know they have a new term now, so, and we went back and looked at all the PUDs. So if you look at some of those products, they had almost no on-site parking. If you compare that same product from a builder today, we now force them, and they now have more on-site parking. And we did widen it a little bit. We did the very good street width study that we flew a drone. We did all the pieces, kept shrinking it down, widening it, seeing what the response time difference was. So we started to fix a lot of those. We then figured out how to optimize gates better. I think we've gone through and done a lot of those. I would say the one that we still have some issues with, and it's the aesthetics of just if I had my way, we wouldn't build the center medium piece, but there's also the aesthetics of what we do. You can look at the entrance into the new senior center thing, and it's got a nice big center median down the middle of it. So, you know.
Yeah, I do think it's an opportunity from not just a fire perspective, but from a planning perspective, that someone do an analysis, taking what data you have, taking what data PD has, just to give us some sense, like, what are the 10 things we've learned about those higher density neighborhoods? Councils can choose whether they want to keep doing them or not. But I mean, I think if we're going to do an 1,800 square foot lot neighborhood, they're going to have to build us a new fire station. I mean, literally, that's it. Like, let's talk amenity, okay. But I just think we can't keep doing what we're doing now and expect these times to ever come down. They're never going to come down.
They're never not. But the good part I will tell everybody is we have benchmarks where we are. We have some of the best times still in the Central Valley where we are. I'm a peer assessor, so I get to go out and see other communities. You know, we do still a good, remarkable job. It's just, how do we maintain that years moving forward? I mean, it's getting worse. It's just, where's the breaking point?
We need to learn from what we've done. So I guess maybe ultimately that would be a request through the mayor to the staff. But I think we've really got to do an analysis, because it's not going to get any, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. And, you know, if it's the wrong thing, we should stop now. Or if there's a variation. And so you've learned a lot of stuff. Anyway, you get my point. But I would like to see an assessment before the BIA comes back and asks what they want for small lots. You know, the trash can thing is just not going to work. Not even both of them together is enough.
I won't touch that one. Well, when we talk fire station and we talk what's coming forward just remember that as we look at fees and pieces where we are, so we were fortunate we didn't pay for Station 5. That was through the sales tax and the bond measure. We take all that funding together, we still wouldn't have enough to pay for Station 6. So we never keep up with inflation, unfortunately, is the downside of where we are. This is our auto aid, what we receive and what we give. As you can see, the numbers to Fresno, again, are rising because of their development to the south of our city, where they want to be in Clovis Unified. Their fire chief has received a letter from me addressing this, or asking them to address this issue, fund their fire station at Armstrong and Clinton, and move to lower that number down to bring it back into alignment there, right around 600, a little under 600. So right now, we unfortunately are serving their growth area till they build a fire station. We've always remained pretty consistent with our good providers of Fresno County Fire and Station 85 in ourselves, and they come and cover our stations. We have fires. And Fresno is, you know, part of where you see that number a little bit higher is, you know, the theory is where I'm putting quarters in, and I'm, you know, withdrawing them at dollars for when I need a second alarm, a third alarm fire. And we normally have one a year that's, you know, multiple houses, something large. So the only place I can tap to get additional resources is from that agency to the west. But we are trying to work on some ways of reducing that number down. We constantly look at the types of calls we go on and how we can keep that in alignment. This is a requirement by the state. So after the Oakland fire, we were mandated to say what is our annual state mandated inspections. We have 342 of them. We completed 327 of them for an occupancy rate of 96%. And we're probably never going to get to 100 because a couple of them are being built. They're in the building stages. They're not finalized yet, but they're in the system. We can't get into them for whatever that reason might be. But to me, that's part of the hazard. The other hazard is where we are with our regular inspections, which is, you know, a Home Depot, a Lowe's. Those large generating sales tax businesses are not in a state mandated inspection. The fire that occurred at Oakland is not in a state mandated inspection. So it's just another law that was passed that really did not solve any problem that was actually there. And Oakland's Fire Prevention Division's been a mess for 20 some odd years. So I won't even touch that one of where their areas are. But if you can see, we're right on our biannual inspections at 97%. Our state mandated, we're right at 96%. And that's with one less person in fire prevention than what we were before. So again, doing a lot more with less, and kind of technology with iPads and other ways of bringing that together. This is where we are with our fire stations. Definitely Station 1 and 5 are still in good condition. Station 4, we need to remodel the kitchen. All the laminate kind of like here is coming off and some pieces like that we need to get fixed. But obviously Station 2 is our biggest concern, what we're waiting for. We have the plans. We're just kind of waiting for the final punch list here through Station 6 because we used a lot of the same things inside. So this way we reduce even further our change orders. So we want to make sure that those plans have all reflected every change that we put into 6 and things we learned as that building was built. The concern, which I'll give it to you now where we are later, is just will we be within what we budgeted for that at the current rate of inflation? We hope so. The engineer estimates still think we're within that reason, but we anticipate that going to bid this summer and bringing that back in September for an award by council, so we'll have a better idea of where that is. This is Station 6 area, so it's coming along. So when we open that station, we anticipate it to serve 1,000 calls a year, and where you see the response times up there for 21 and 11 minutes, we hope to bring those back down to around the 7-8 minute mark and service those communities. We anticipate, well, almost 9,000 residents in that area for the first 2 of that station that are there today. So I do need some feedback from City Council. We're not 100% sure because we were supposed to get a 2-week notice before the walkthrough, and then it's basically 2 weeks for them to finish the punch list. We have not received that yet, but let's just say the date I'm shooting for would possibly be, well, my question to you is would you object if I move the crew and put the crew in before the council ribbon cutting of the new station? Okay. Okay, so I just want to make sure we were good with that. It'll still be clean before you show up, but I just want to make sure there was no hard feelings if I put the station in service before we had the ribbon cutting ceremony.
Bob expects a PowerPoint for that though.
On the garage? I don't know about that, but maybe I'll work on, and maybe like a 3-page pamphlet brochure for the day or something, so something for you. Or maybe. So we're coming along. It's getting landscape right now. We've got a few issues to work through. It's always when you get to the final portion with builders, it's always difficult. You
had some landscaping issues to work through? Did I hear that?
Well, the landscaping's getting finished, but we do have an issue there to solve. We got a few little pieces to solve. So we've got nothing major, but we put pavers down that kind of go across that way. Now it looks like a path of travel, and it's not ADA accessible, so now we have to remove a piece. We've got just a couple of things we've got to tighten up once it gets completed. So even after the builder's done, we've got a little bit of a punch list that us as the city need to take care of. But CIP staff and construction management, everybody's been great on working our way through there. We're hoping somewhere for them to turn it over to us the end of May, and I'm kind of shooting for June 4th as the go-to day for, before it gets too hot for the ribbon cutting. So check your schedules. But we're very happy to see where that goes. This is where we spent a lot of money in the last, few years, and you can see it all there at green on the bottom, but we had to make up for where we were, that 2003, 2006, 2011. I mean, that's where the money didn't, we really went lean in those years and put it towards there, but we're finally down below what we anticipate to be our engines at 15 years, our ladder trucks at 20, so we need to be out there right around the, 9.5 mark, and we're actually down there right at 9 right now. So, and we have an engine that'll be delivered at the end of this year. So engine 40, which is the F up there, will go out of service as soon as it gets built. So we've done a tremendous job on our fleet, and that's where we've definitely spent the funds. And the nice work of Jay and his staff and what they've done is the last 3, maybe 4, we have not taken it on debt. So we don't have the bond payments. We paid cash, and we haven't had to go back to finance it. So with Luke Serpa's leadership in that, that's gone back to being able not to have to finance for where we are. So our challenges for the future, where are we? So all measurable response times continue to increase to somewhat starting to become an alarming rate. We're almost at 2 standard deviations, which is where we don't want to be. And next year with the road and where we get it open, since it'll probably only be half a year, it'll be an interesting statistical analysis to see what the improvement really is. But again, Station 6 brings our department, like I said, back to 67. We were 68 in 2008. And my administrative staff was 9, and we're only 6 today. So we definitely truly haven't expanded. We just redistributed. So that's really what we've done, is redistributed our resources to better serve the community. Concern the current budget for rebuilding Station 2 might not be enough to actually get it done at the current rate of inflation. We'll see later this year. Developer impact fees, as I said, aren't keeping up with the cost to fund the required fire department expansions and for new growth. Funds need to be set aside, which the good work of John Holt, it was in the 5-year plan, and Jay's staff is to, I would like to see, now I won't be the fire chief up here asking for this request there by 2030 range, but my whole goal of where we haven't planned well in the past is it would be nice to go and actually renovate Station 3 for probably $4 million, maybe by then 5 to 5.5, then having to do what we technically have a past practice of doing, which was build Station 5, have to replace Station 1, build Station 6, replace Station 2. I'm trying to avoid, or my recommendation, and John's put in the 5-year forecast, is let's try to avoid build Station 7 and build new Station 3. Let's see if we can get in for half the cost or even, a third of the cost. Let's renovate it and then in turn get another 30 years out of the life of that building.
Chief, I had a question for you on this slide, because you touch on something here that I want to just focus on in your bullet point number 2.
Okay.
It says developer impact fees are not keeping up with cost to fund the required fire department expansion to service the new growth. So there's 2 issues there that I see. One is the fire department expansion and then the service, right? So fire department expansion to me means, the developer impact fees are designed to build the station, to put forward the capital costs associated with it, because development needs to pay its own way. But then when we talk about servicing the new growth, that's generally not something that's paid for by the development impact fees. If you mean by servicing the new growth, you mean the labor costs associated with, staffing those new stations.
I would say it's both. So developer impact fees pays for the fire engine. It pays for the initial set of turnout gear, the fire engine that's in there. All those pieces are eligible and should be paid out of developer impact fees, which would be about $11 to $12 million per station, all in. Currently, we don't collect enough under today's dollars over the past 20 years to equate to that $12 million mark.
Okay, and that's something that we need to address.
Which we've raised them tremendously since I've been here.
Okay.
And where we were, I want to say around $600-700, we're at $1,400. We have a proposal based strictly off of our hard costs for Station 6 and the land acquisition and the fire engine, so they're pre-inflation, that we've worked with Mike Harrison and his staff on to bring those, I believe, into $1,800 range. Okay. Fresno's going for $2,000. So we've all kind of experienced the same thing, but that's part of the DIF. But which we all know the heartburn a few years ago, I'll let, City Manager Holt tell you those days, but when you go back and ask for the 30% from them, it's a lot harder than you just kind of, you miss those opportunities when you're that far behind and we have to go for such a large increase.
Right.
To try to get them over the period of time.
So when you're talking about servicing the new growth, you're not talking about personnel costs. You are actually talking about the new product that needs to be purchased in order to make sure that you guys have the gear that you need.
I tell you, it's both, and this is why. So let's go back and look at Loma Vista. If you look at Loma Vista compared to where we were for other developments, and even Station 5 comes in, if you look at measurable rooftops and the higher level, once you kind of get over 100,000 population, that measurement of rooftops doesn't really start to bring you in more retailers for sales tax and stuff till you hit a much higher number because you're only going to get one Lowe's, you're only going to get one Home Depot, you're only going to get one Costco, unfortunately. And what we're seeing with Amazon in those pieces is it's becoming much more suburban community out there in 5s and 4s and even 6s area without the sales tax revenue that support that. And that's really where it is. If you take that property tax, call it what it is, $50 billion out there, run the numbers down, bring it down to what we get of our 12% or so, roughly gives you about $7 million. By the time you put law enforcement, police on there, it's not enough money just off a straight property tax of assessed value to run it. You need that additional revenue to pay for that expansion.
Well, that was one of the reasons, that was one of the reasons why we passed that CFD. That Community Facilities District was designed for those new areas to address the ongoing maintenance or ongoing servicing of the needs of the police department and the fire department. And they're paying in those areas, those outline areas, the new development, they're paying more than what the people are in the core of the city of Clovis, right? Yet the people in the core of the city of Clovis are not paying as much, but they're getting better service, as we see from some of the response times at least, right? So that is a puzzle that needs to be worked through and solved. And I don't know what that solution is. I mean, I'm hoping it's not increased sales tax. I mean, you know that about me already. But there has to be another way to address those concerns. And frankly, I'm bringing it up to you because I think you've got a brilliant mind and you like puzzles, I think, and try to figure stuff out like this. So if you can figure it out, great.
I'll give you this one for the puzzle.
Okay.
The original number was too low. It hasn't kept up with PERS cost.
You mean the original CFD number?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The current CFD, I believe, is $2.7 million in the red.
Okay.
For what it was allocated to pay for to what it's actually generated, I believe my wonderful mind that knows numbers but no names, it's roughly about $2.7 million. I'm shooting that one off the hip, but I think I'm pretty close of where it is already in the red.
Okay.
And I live in that community, so I'll give you one. I live in that one, and just when I say it's too low is for my LMD to make sure my exterior there and the trail is clean, I pay $425 a year, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
I pay like $250 for the CFD.
Okay.
So I'm paying tremendously more to make sure there's trees and grass and stuff out there mowed than what I am for the public safety protection.
All right, I want to go down that rabbit hole a little bit more.
Okay.
So I'm going to own what I'm just going to call an error, which was that we did two things when I first got on the council. One was the 3% at 50, and then also we wanted to make sure that we got we put some of our police and fire at that 75th percentile. You know how we have that salary survey, right? And so there was a moment in which people who worked in public safety in the city of Clovis, they had a really generous retirement, and they also had a pretty good salary relative to the comparison cities. And so we have swallowed this huge, I'll call it a pig, like as a python, and it's just taking a long time for us to digest those two errors that I've just discussed. And I'm owning up to them. CalPERS, as a result, of course, our CalPERS costs are extremely high because of the retirement associated with an increased salary and that 3% at 50. We are starting to see that hog is being digested, that we're starting to see a flattening of the CalPERS, and eventually, though I haven't seen it in the 5-year forecast, but hopefully, maybe in the year 2030, we're going to start to see that dropping off. Now, does that, I know you're not going to be around then, But does that provide some optimism that the funds that you have, or the mechanisms, the funding mechanisms that you have in place are eventually going to kind of pay for the increase that you see for servicing the citizens of the city of Clovis?
Well, I go back to that original one of, remember that the staff where we were back in 2002 to, let's say, 2008 range is 75% how where you were is it's either your costs are here for salaries and the number of people, but then you reduce capital outlay.
Right.
Or these come more in alignment and then capital outlay comes back into it. It's the two evils. Back then, we were not spending on capital outlay. We were spending the money on personnel. So it's that balancing act at all times. I don't necessarily know by 2030 that we would be back in alignment, to be honest. I actually think we're farther behind.
Okay.
That's the cold hard truth is we bought a lot of equipment, but in turn it still needs to be maintained. We're talking, police
Unless, of
mechanics.
course, you had just an F-150, it wouldn't require as much maintenance.
It's still actually, truly, when you look at it, the cost again, it would be F-150, where do I get the additional staff cost is what.
Right.
Staffing
That's
is where the money is. I mean, let's be honest, my budget's 80% staff. And that's where the costs really come in over time. But if you don't have the full width, you've got to diminish some capital expenditures to keep maintaining that. And things will get, like I said, we need another, so where do we put away the $5 million for Station 3 remodel? And by then, with inflation at 2030, it could be $6 million. Where is that? I mean, we should be really thankful that we got the ARPA funds to help offset taking on bond debt for Station 2, of having to rebuild it, because there was really no set aside for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that domino keeps going farther and farther. I mean, when you look at square footage of facilities, I'm probably one of the larger, at least number-wise. Scott's group out there, public utilities, might have a larger square footprint, but at least a number of buildings and stuff between public utilities and myself is we are the two biggest, renters of that space.
Mm-hmm.
So it is just, the more you get out there, Station 6, over time it's going to need, maintenance, repair. Sooner or later, then when does it come to facilities needs another person to maintain that? That's why I said it's so hard to get ahead of where we are. We didn't put solar on it because we were waiting to see what happened with Station 2 and any PG&E rebates or anything. So there's another cost that comes down the pike of how do we get solar on both of those buildings and where do those funds come from? I mean, it's just truly that balancing act. But, I mean, we've done a nice job. We've always have. But, in order to get ahead, we're still the same 67 we were in 08. And that's really what's out there is we're not getting ahead. We're just redistributing our resources.
Okay, thanks.
And that's it. So in summary, there's our 10 new hires with their probationary helmet shield. We make them wear it for a year. They just completed probation, so they all got their, they don't have to wear orange anymore. So that's where we are. So they're back to normal. And again, myself and my Deputy Chief, Chris Eck, are here to ask any additional questions of where we are. But, we have challenges out there. We're always doing the best we can with the resources that you allocate. And I'm honestly trying everything I possibly can to keep those response times down. Anything I see out there, anything I could do, that is what my goal is, because we are in an industry where, and there's enough data out there that once you kind of come to like 9 minutes, there's almost no why you're going. The fire's already so large, it's beyond, it's to that main house, the loss of, life from cardiac events and stuff like that at 9 minutes, you're not going to change. So when you start to see that curve go like this, and it just flattens after that. So we don't want to be a community that's out here. So then it becomes the point of we have 10-minute response times. Even if you're going to say, here's $2 million to improve it, well, why bother? 9 isn't really going to change a lot of outcomes then. And we're really trying to be outcome driven, and that's really where we are is how do we change outcomes on the other end? And, almost 99% of everything, or at least 94% of everything we go to, the emergency is still occurring when we get there, and we're trying to save lives and property, and that's our goal. And we are an industry where time does matter. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Chief, that was really good. Just a question, I guess I've never really it's not 9 o'clock, so no, you don't get to talk for another hour and 40 minutes, I'm just kidding. 20 minutes.
I was just saying how bad I did, to be honest.
I think I don't understand how the CFD failed us so miserably. And I don't know if we want to do it tonight, but I think that's another sort of, we, at least as this council member, I don't pause enough to go, what did I learn from that can help us going forward? And I feel like the CFD, in theory, was the right mechanism, but it failed for police and fire. And I don't know why, and maybe I'm wrong in that assessment, but I guess I would like to understand that a little bit. Some analysis of what, did we not build in enough inflation? I don't understand that.
We can take a look at it. The bottom line is going to be what the chief summarized, is going to be that it started too low and never grew enough.
So how is it that we've never,
It goes up, but just look at that cost, 24.5% in COLA increases. You've got another 23.5 in PERS. So in the 10-year period, you've got roughly 40-some-odd% increase. In that same 10-year period, the CFD didn't keep pace.
So anyway, I just think what lesson can we learn from high-density neighborhoods? What lessons can we learn from the CFD that answers in part your question about what happened to 70% rise in police cost if 45 in fire was, you know what I mean? So I think we see that, but we've never corrected. Started too low and we've never corrected. Is it too late? We probably have to raise it 60% today, which is probably not be popular. But I think, I'm just curious about that. And the other thing I just was remembering is, I don't know if you do remember this study, Andy, you did some years ago on the hotspots and calls for service. And I don't know if that's a popular thing in fire service anymore, but Andy, I thought it was incredibly interesting. Now, you probably aren't going to the calls that got the hotspot calls in 2008, 9, 10, or whatever that was. But
we have the same maps. They're in the standard to cover where they are. It's a trade-off of, if you want to see hotspot calls, this is Carmel Village is a great example of a call that uses, but do the seniors need a place to live? Absolutely. Is it better for them to have some on-site and the ability to kind of start at one level and work your way down to the rear? Absolutely. So a lot of it is a trade-off of where we are for some of those calls. The other aspect that you look at it is the Southwest, definitely Station 2, due to a multitude of factors, is by far our busiest station. It was back in 2008 when they had two companies there. It's the busiest one today in 2021. So social economics, the age, and remember, as your community ages, the fire risk grows.
Careful.
Fire risk grows. You're talking about buildings, not you.
Oh, good. Okay, I feel better.
Don't worry, I'm aging the same way.
I just remember the two examples I remember from that study that I quoted for a long, long time was one resident in the course of 12 months had 74 calls for service because they couldn't find his asthma inhaler. That solution is not a fire truck. That solution was a public health intervention. And the second was a domestic violence cluster in an apartment complex. So I just think those are, I think those are instructive about.
He's back.
Oh, no, is he really?
Yes, he is.
Oh, well.
In the later parts of the month. So he is back. We get him all the time, and we work with Adult Protective Services. The county's been a lot more receptive. We get there for the fact that I can't get out of my chair because I need the remote, or I want to lower the thermostat. And what's ironic about it is they get educated quite well, to be honest, of exactly what to say during Pro QA. Of I have chest pains, I'm short of breath, something along the key, we call them the 7 key words. They learn the 7 key words that trigger our response, and then we have an obligation to go out there, but we do work with the county health all the time on it, and it's I like how I say we. Deputy Chief Eck works with the county health to resolve those problems.
That's good, because I think those were two pretty interesting.
But it's funny that you mentioned that one, because
he's back, huh?
Even myself knows that name, and we were just talking about him at command.
Apparently his asthma is still not under control.
He runs out of medicine. Still the same issue that we have, and then it's where it is, so it comes at later part of the month. So, but that's where we are. But you see our hotspots, we're seeing a lot more fire into the Southwest, and we're seeing a lot more that we haven't seen, dumpster fires, alley fires, just stuff from those kind of nuisance transient fires that are out there. We start to see a lot more of those in the wintertime, and that's where we're at. And it's just as those communities age in those areas, you definitely see an increase in fire activity.
Thanks for your report.
Thank you.
Sure. Chief, when can we expect to hear back from the city of Fresno about?
Chief Donis and I have a good relationship. We're probably going to work through our ways and with their deputy chief on some calls that we need to look at to see if we're going to respond to and try to reduce that. She was using that for her budget process, which will hopefully help them. But we know the fact that even if they allocated the funding in this fiscal year, it'll take them 3 years to build that fire station. I mean, that's how long the process takes to design, bid it, build it. So we know it's there. We're working through some mitigation measures right now. So we'll work with our staff and work that through. I feel confident in that and blowing that number down.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent report again, Chief. Wanted to ask you, with regards to the time for EMS, do we know the ambulance times, and can that be an asterisk in which, even though it's 50% were responded by ambulance in 5 minutes? Or, so that way we know our trucks are getting there later because of things we can't change, but at least they're being taken care of. Is there something to that at all?
I sit on the county EMCC committee representing the Fresno County Fire Chiefs. The ambulance through American Ambulance, that agreement sits with the county. So the 1979 EMS Act gave all that authority to the counties, took it away, unfortunately, from the cities, which is kind of ironic since Cal Cities really was the one who pushed paramedicine and some of those issues back in the day. But here or there, we got hoodwinked by the 1979 EMS Act, but we've done a great service, or at least I have as the representative on that committee, in my opinion. I proposed a different way of, so their contract says what they have to perform in. I proposed one idea that was more equitable to, let's say, the county. There was some pushback resistance. At the end of the day, I represent the city of Clovis, so the Clovis is its own separate response zone that American Ambulance does an excellent job. That's why you see now in the last 3 years out of Shaw and DeWolf, the post there at that property, that was from that requirement in their recent EOA contract that went into effect in 2019. So their performance is they must arrive at 9 minutes 90% of the time for all calls. They perform that around 94, 95. Even during COVID, there are issues that they have with staffing and people out on COVID leave and quarantine and everything like that. It dipped to about 91%, but American Ambulance did a fantastic job of meeting that response time. And that's pretty much what we look at the tiered response approach. We come in as BLS at here, that we're trying to shoot for that 6:37 minutes. They come in at 9 minutes in ALS. We have one of the better ambulance providers for that in the county. If you look at San Diego County, San Bernardino County, some of them are into 11, 12 minutes. So we definitely, American provides a good service to our citizens, and that's part of my job to make sure that they're providing it to the citizens, not only of Clovis, but Fresno County sitting on that committee. But that is the tier approach, and that tier approach appears to be working. So we get there, we start with our AEDs, we start chest compressions, all those BLS skills, ask them the questions. They come in then, use the ALS skills, which you got to go through BLS before you get to ALS. So we have to get through that no matter who gets there. But normally we arrive before they do. Depending, calls close to the hospital, they normally have units become available or they're posted there. They get there a little bit closer around Clovis community, also a little bit around Shaw. Once we come into our Station 6, we'll probably start to beat them in that area. But over here in the Southwest and the Central Core, we almost always beat them to the calls first is the Clovis Fire Department. And that's what we're intended to do. Get there first, run the BLS, and then get the ALS care.
So, but does that help in our numbers? So maybe even if it's only 5% of the calls they beat us to, we may still be getting there at 8, but maybe they're there at 5. So does it help in the realities of the reporting that some help is there? Because if we look at it here, if they're as long as they're making it by 9, we beat them, then it's all us. But I assume there are cases in which someone is there helping the residents already before we get there, and then somehow you can capture that if it is being captured.
it's being captured in greater numbers than that, so it's harder to filter that down to
Okay.
our level. But even if we were there, we look at these high acute calls, the ambulance just shows up with 2 people. Those higher acute calls like the chest pain, the paramedics there have to drop medicine, get their IVs ready, all those things. So even for those calls, they need much more than what they're providing as the ambulance. So they need us there. So we kind of look at that whole continuum of care of how many people are there. So, you know, for a cardiac arrest, 5's the bare minimum. There's departments out there that are now responding 6 or 7 because of pit crew CPR and pieces like that that they're doing to high compression rate, and keeping that steady over a longer period of time really shows an increase in patient outcomes.
With the mutual aid, is there a economic benefit or exchange at all?
There is.
Other than, so for example, if we respond to 100 and they only respond to 50, they need to reimburse us for that extra 50 that we went to, or is this agreed upon and we suffer economically because
I don't necessarily say we suffer economically. So you got to remember is to have additional resources to staff a second alarm or more resources, we have to pay for that all the time. By having that agreement with Fresno, they send it to us through that agreement. They are the ones who then pay for that staffing all the time. So there is no exchange of money. So we used to have an exchange. It was $1,000 a call. We used to clear it up at the end of the year. It was an absolute mess. Auto aid should never run that way. It should be clear exchanges of calls for service. And part of that calls for service that you see where we are is you could be, there's places in the city of Clovis that will always get a potentially Fresno County or Fresno City fire engine. They're staffed the same with 3 people. They all have the same training. We train together regionally, like we're doing wildland training right now. We do that with Fresno County, and ourselves. So it shouldn't matter what the sticker is on the door. So when we talk this performance, this includes those auto aid partners coming to us. I monitor their responses, so it doesn't matter who came to the door. We want to make sure they're highly skilled, highly professional, treating our citizens right, and that's how we get them here. But auto aid, there is no exchange of money. But it works well for us on a structure fire. We still have calls for EMS that need to be serviced. They then cover, like Station 85 comes down and covers our station. They're able to go respond to service those medical aid calls. Or we've unfortunately had simultaneous structure fires. We had one in 2015, less than a mile apart, and we relied on our auto aid partners to assist with the second structure fire. So, it's basically that cash reserve that we get that we don't have to pay for.
and does that get accounted for in the actual time then?
Yes. No matter, if it's a call in the city of Clovis, it doesn't matter who responded to that, we have all of that data.
Okay. So if they're later, say it takes 9, then we record it as 9.
Yes, whatever that performance is for every citizen. The things that are not in there is us responding to a call in Fresno or Fresno County. When we talk about that performance on those speedometers, that's only for calls service within the city of Clovis to our residents.
Okay. Will CERT be starting back up?
CERT's back up. We had them out at the training symposium. They'll be out at the rodeo. We're starting to get them all back up, especially we kind of the age group of some members of there due to COVID in the beginning. We definitely were, they were at-risk groups, so we definitely turned off a lot of what they are, but we're bringing them back on and using them to the best. We normally use them more in summer than winter. I mean, just because of the high heat, fighting fire takes us longer. Winter time, we don't have to rehydrate and do as much to rehab people before we can go back in service.
And I would have to agree with Mayor Pro Tem Ashbeck with regards to neighborhoods and densities, and safety is never brought up in our discussions. Environmental gets brought up, but then it's exempted with not having to meet anything. But to have some solid data back up in how it affects services, I think it'll help us in discussions on the state level, so that element gets included, not just so that we understand it here locally, but I think it would really help us discussing at the Cal Cities level to have that component discussed, because it's never brought, I don't remember it ever being brought up, how yeah, it affects, response time, so that would be very helpful.
I sit on the Cal Cities board, and I can tell you that board has very limited view of public safety that's on there. And that's about as politely as I can put it, as the representative for the California Fire Service, and I do hear the poor police chief who's on there, and he brings up his comments, I bring up mine, and it's definitely, glossed over by several of the committee members.
We'll try to do it on our level, see where it goes. And lastly, I just wanted to say thanks for that nice touch of recognizing, engineer Brad Couchman, who
Yes, he served us
retired
well
in
and he
your,
retired.
yeah, in your
Everybody's making fun of me
beginning.
because he thinks he's the fire chief.
Yeah.
He's on the page, so he got promoted to fire chief before he left. Where's your photo, chief? So.
Nice touch. Yeah, very good.
So can I just wave really fast on that? Just on a personal note, Brad was the officer that responded to my friend's husband's accident, and his wife continues to visit the fire station annually on the date of her husband's accident, and he's since passed away, and she still visits, and she happened to drop by the day of his retirement, and she was so happy. So the Clovis fire had a lasting impact on that family in Clovis.
We tried to.
Yeah, it's really very sweet.
Maybe we discussed this previously, the logistics center, Bullard and Fowler, what's the plan for that building?
Well, right now, we are finishing up design. They should have that into, building here in the first part of May for the training building, the 3,100 square foot training building facility. We will then, October-ish, if the plans go well, we'll move the crew from Station 2 into the training building. They'll spend, let's say, roughly 12 months in there, come back out the end of 23, go back to the station, to the new one. Then our goal is where we have the first existing classroom at the training center with the roll-up door. We are going to put logistics in there. The office that the training captain's in at the current training center will become the logistics officer's office, and then we will fully be able to vacate the current building and it's got a lot of structural issues. We barely have one operational bathroom. To vacate it, and then it'll be probably turned into some form to a developer, somebody to do some form of residential would be my guess of where that would go. But just so we all have the time frame, that's probably mid-24 before all those dominoes come into effect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anything, but thank you for the work you do in the report, good report, and kind of opens our eyes as far as some of the funding deficiencies, and we heard it from the chief earlier in the month, and now we heard it from you too, as far as finding other ways to fund all of our public safety services. So it's good to hear that both of you are thinking about that, and I know John is, and so is Jay back there, and we got to come up with ways to meet those challenges in the future. And yeah, I think Bob's point that there's a few of us up here that kind of helpful in making a couple of mistakes. So yeah, but I think I don't know if they were mistaken. Maybe we weren't as bold as we should have been, and because we cared about the citizens and we didn't want to invade their wallets as much as other cities might have, and so that's my excuse anyway. So it's a receive and file, so thank you. Oh, yeah, public comments. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item? Thank you, Bob. In the web?
No.
No? Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, and like I said, taxation in California is an unfair fight. I mean, at the end of the day, when you go look at where our costs are compared to coastal cities and other ones, their cost for labor and their cost for equipment and stuff is not 50% less than what ours is, but they're getting 50 to 75% more revenue per capita. I mean, it's just a sad state of how, I would say if there was one lesson we should have learned from the recession is maybe we should have switched sales tax more to the state and actually brought more property tax back to local government. But no one was really pushing that during the recession to do that. Everybody was trying to take more money out of local cities' pockets and put it in the state pocket, but it's the way the beast is made, and unfortunately, it's just totally unfair throughout the state of California.
And that's one of the reasons if you go into a dry cleaners, you see police and fire uniforms from the Bay Area and the coast, from people who can't afford to live there, live here, work there. And those are the people that sometimes we're able to pull in when they want to come home and actually be part of a community.
One of our recent hires came from Long Beach back home, so he was working Long Beach Fire and came back home. So we definitely get the people who graduated from wonderful Clovis Unified School District and came here to work. So we do appreciate that, the community that we live in.
Good job.
Thank you.
John, city manager's comments?
We're just going to start off by saying that this discussion of development impact fees is pretty timely because Mike Harrison will be coming forward next month with a proposal on increased development impact fees, and they're pretty significant. And you know, on an annual basis, when we bring these, it's really contentious with the industry. So we'll be coming back next month for you to consider some increases. They are. Couple items I have up there is going to be item number 1. I just noticed that I got a flyer the other day, Measure C renewal community meetings. We happen to have one in here tomorrow night, so I just wanted to mention that. The next item is going to be a request from CUSD. We had a conference call with them yesterday. They're pursuing a $10 million grant through Assemblymember Patterson's office. It's for synthetic grass and lighting in various locations. They reached out to me because they have a request that they want to pass the monies through the city and potentially have the city pay the contractors. I don't have any more detail on that, but just wanted to give you a heads up. Once I get more detail, I'll likely schedule something for the agenda next month.
Nothing like a joint powers authority?
At this point, I don't know anymore. Just there's potentially Prop 98 would benefit them. I want to also bring up for item number 3 is that Councilmember Bessinger is going to be not attending that meeting. We had scheduled the Citizens Advisory Committee to come back on May 2nd. I wanted to see, as it's an important subject, and I wanted to see if the group wanted to consider moving that discussion item to the 9th or the 16th. Be looking for feedback.
I hate to raise it because I don't want this to go to the ballot, but is that going to mess us up a little bit for our timing if we want to have it on the November ballot?
The timing is short. 1 week will not kill it. We've got, Scott, I recall it's August 12th is the final deadline to get everything to the county clerk to get it on the ballot for November 8th. So either way, we'll come back and we're putting together a presentation. Either way we look at it, that's a really tight timeline to get something on the ballot.
August, what was the date?
12.
Yeah, 88 days before, so August 12th, I believe, is the absolute deadline to have everything ballot language approved, if that's the desire of the council, to the county to get.
We generally have one meeting in August, the first Monday, and is that
It happens to be August 1st, but we could potentially move that to August 8th. So we have some flexibility. So what are your druthers?
I'm fine with
The 9th, I'm fine with that.
Want to participate?
Actually, John had reached out to me, and I asked basically the same question you asked. I'm getting back in California midday on the 8th, so I will be here on the 9th. Well, hopefully. And if I knew that I was going to be somewhere that had internet capability, I would say I'll definitely make the 2nd, but I have no idea where, you know, it's
10-hour difference?
It's crapshoot for that. I mean, 10-hour difference I can deal with. First, I'll keep the camera off because I'll have a big German beer in front of me. But I would be more than happy to do that, but I just don't know the logistics, so the 9th is the best call.
Okay, we'll go ahead and switch it to the 9th. The last, go ahead.
What is the outcome of the conversation? Is it to make a call on how to proceed, tax, no tax, parcel tax?
Staff would be looking for direction from City Council on how we're going to move forward, and that's part of the discussion.
So if, let's just imagine that Bob raises the idea of a sales tax and what a good idea that is that the action item?
Well, then that would...
Can we act on it on May 9th, or are we still going to come back on May 16th?
well, we could come back on May 16th. We could actually receive direction from City Council to begin the process, and there's, it's spelled out in the, election law exactly what needs to be done, and there's a, you know, we spent 2.5 years on it in 2008-9 to get it on the ballot. So to put it on the ballot in 2.5 months is quite a lift. It could be done, though. Maybe you're not doing any polling, you're just kind of putting it out there on the ballot. Sure, thanks, Bob. The last item I have, one more slide, Andy. The last item I have is going to be the signage that we had talked about putting up in the council chamber about 2 months ago. So I want to start off with a big thank you to Shauna Halterman and Chad McCollum, whose this idea was, and most importantly, Carrie Cha, who actually put it all together with the mayor's design. We added the emblem at the bottom, which is probably not going to show up on photos with people standing in front of it, but it was a nice touch that staff added. So they're going to install it this week, so when you come to your meeting on May 2nd, I didn't want to surprise you.
That gold star is gonna be there, huh?
It will.
24 karat.
What?
24 karat.
That's all I've got.
Yeah. Okay. Council comments. Bong.
Yeah, I want to thank staff for putting Measure C at the forefront of everything that we are announcing, at least on the council, and for Chad keeping that at least on our website. The virtual, if we can also push that out for the virtual in case citizens can come online. I think that's just that Friday as well, the 22nd. And I don't know how it looks internally, if we can push that since they're so invested in the city, for them to spend time virtually to comment. I think it's a short little survey, and if the staff can also comment on it, just give some input, I think that'll be helpful for Measure C. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Bob.
I was just impressed today with our chiefs and the way that you guys have had to, go through some work over the last few months. Chief Fleming at the Citizens Advisory Committee and the reports that we received from those participants and how much they respected you, not just because of your title, but because of the way that you handled yourself. And then Chief Benansky, I know we give you a bad time about, your long presentations, but they're always very informative and well thought out. And you are anticipating some of the questions that we're going to be having, and you try to address them, straight up. So, anyway, I think anybody had the opportunity to watch this meeting or sit in on this meeting, hopefully is going to be very impressed with the chiefs of our public safety division. So, just wanted to call you out and thank you for the way that you handle yourselves.
Sure.
I will be, I'm headed to Germany next week, and the city that I'm going to, it's Heilbronn, where I was stationed. Heilbronn is 120,000 people, just like us, a little bit more industrial. And when I was the mayor, I sent the mayor a letter asking him if he wanted to be our sister city. I never heard back from him, which frankly irritated me. He got reelected, so I re-upped the letter and sent it to him, and just got the letter tonight. I have to have somebody who is going to translate it for me because I only get a couple of the words in there. So hopefully I may have something to come back to the council with on a concept.
I don't even know what Sister City means these days. Maybe it'll help us on.
Yeah, well, I mean, most cities of a certain size have sister cities, and I mean, it doesn't cost us anything. It's it's an exchange of ideas, and and I'm thinking, if we decide we're going to do this, it would be a perfect opportunity for the city that you went to high school in.
Well,
And, yeah, well, maybe something smaller, and so I think we all have places in our heart that aren't in Clovis, and so to be a discussion for another day. That's all I have.
I always thought we should have sister cities in Fresno County, through COG, because I've always said that the things that Clovis discards are way better than what most cities can afford. So I've always thought we should also have sister cities in the valley, because we could help San Joaquin or other communities. So I've long held on to that idea. But I don't really have anything else. That was really nice what you said to those two chiefs. And you were right. So I'll second that. It's not easy doing the work you do. So thanks. That's it.
I don't have much. I'm proud to be part of this body and contribute to this city, knowing that we have great staff and that they're taking care of the citizens, and it shows every day. And we're a small oasis in this desert of stupid ideas that exist up in Sacramento, and so
Okay, wait,
you
worth writing down. I gotta write it up.
and
In the desert of
and that's, and because of that, I'm a proud member of this council. So thank you for that. So with
Clovis, California, small oasis in the desert.
You know, maybe we put that on the front.
Yeah, get the picture, put it right down here.
I'm glad I amused you. Okay. So we're adjourned with that levity.